My Borrowed Son. Chapter 12. Snow Day. The alarm didn't need to wake him up. He was already awake. Parker was up and dressed, reading his papers for class later that day. They were reading some fun books from Mr. Tamplin, including The Magic Treehouse, Charlotte's Web, and Fantastic Mr. Fox. All of them seemed a bit easy if Parker was being honest with himself, but Mr. Tamplin was already ahead of the curve. He had already recommended a few books specifically for Parker that were technically above his reading level, but assured Parker that they were well within his level of comprehension. Books like Aragon, The Maze Runner, and A Wrinkle in Time now filled Parker's entire room. His mom had picked out the books on a tablet she gifted to him with his first perfect report card, and now Parker couldn't get enough. For hours he stared at the screen and flipped through page after page as he devoured the books. It wasn't just Mr. Tamplin who was investing in more advanced options for Parker. His science teacher, Ms. Reagan Ocha, had recommended some fascinating biology books, as well as some documentaries for Parker to watch. His math class felt fundamental, so Mrs. Cora Dormond Nowell supplied additional assignments that now placed Parker at a 7th grade level. The only one who didn't seem willing to provide additional studying material was Ms. Kane, who seemed adamant that history was best taught in person and that he could learn with the rest of his classmates. Thankfully, Parker's mom found a tutor who was willing to help give him some additional assignments. It made things easier that he could study on his own and had his mother's help when he needed it. He also had additional tutoring sessions because, as his mom said, she didn't want him to feel limited and wanted to give him the tools he needed to succeed. What made everything so great was that his mom never forced him to do the extra assignments. Everything he did was because he wanted to do it, and he loved it. Parker loved learning, and it was only helping him understand the world more. He didn't find anything else about his condition, sadly, but that was okay. Perhaps one day he would learn enough to be a leading scientist to cure and discover more about his own condition. So, as Parker finished his reading and logged into his account, a message flashed on the screen that made his heart sink. School closed. Snow day.
Snow? Oh wait, it snowed?
Parker quickly leapt from his desk and ran across the table toward his ladder that led up to the window. He hurried up one handhold after the next until he stood on the ledge. His heart fluttered nervously as he pushed the curtain off to the side ever so slightly and slipped between the fabric and glass. The moment he did, he saw it. A winter wonderland. The snow was already a few inches deep and covered the windowsill as well as part of the yard outside. Big, fluffy snowflakes drifted from the light gray sky that Parker could have sworn was as big as him. He pressed his palms against the frosty glass and watched as his breath fogged up the scene in front of him. Parker loved the snow. As disappointed as he was that school was closed for the day, he was equally as excited to go outside and play in the snow. He remembered the first time he saw snow. It was late in the day, and he had just finished dinner with his mom when she hurried to the kitchen all excited. She scooped him up and spoke quickly before pulling the curtains and holding him up to the window. His sporadic memory filled in the gaps of him getting dressed in a few extra blankets as his mom brought him outside. Parker remembered the frigid air hitting him and the pinch of snow his mom gave him as she placed it in her palm with him. He was 6 or so years old if he remembered correctly. Parker remembered grabbing one of the snowflakes in his fingers and staring at it in awe. Seeing something so small and so beautiful was mesmerizing. It made him feel, in a weird way, complete. Like things this small were supposed to exist. Like he was supposed to be there. It was a weird, momentary sensation, and something Parker would remember for the rest of his life. Parker? Hearing his name made him jump out of his skin. With his heart pounding, Parker realized he had been drawn into memories long since past.
Yes, Mama?
He called back as he stepped out from behind the curtain. He saw his mom come into the bedroom with a cup of hot chocolate and a much smaller cup for him. He hurried down the ladder and waved to his mom to let her know where he was. She was bundled up in her stay-at-home robe, meaning that she was working from home today. There you are, sweetie. I was trying not to wake you, but it looks like you were already up for school, said his mom. She handed him the small mug once he was settled at his desk. Sorry. The school called this morning saying school was canceled. I turned off the alarms, but it seems like you were already up.
Yeah, I had to know what happened in the next chapter of Aragon,
said Parker as he sniffled the hot chocolate in his mug. He played with the top of the marshmallow as it blipped beneath the chocolate, leaving little lines on its white surface. Oh, is it a good book? Asked his mom. Parker knew she had already read through the book once before, but she refused to talk about it in fear of spoiling anything for her son. It was frustrating for Parker. It was knowledge she had but wasn't sharing.
It's so good. I just got to the part where Saphira took Aragon away. He rode her, Mama. He's a dragon rider. But what's going to happen to his uncle? He's going to be okay, right?
Asked Parker. His mom hid behind her mug and smiled. I don't know. You'll have to read about it and tell me, she said. Parker's bottom lip stuck out as his brow furrowed.
I don't like it when you do that. If you know, you should just tell me. I don't like you knowing and me not knowing,
mumbled Parker. In frustration, he took a big bite out of his marshmallow and stared at his mug. Because he was looking down and away, Parker missed the sudden pained look in his mom's eyes. Amanda heard that statement and could only think about the biggest secret she had ever kept in her life. Guilt weighed on her mind and on her soul. She wanted to tell Parker everything, and yet she wanted to keep these secrets for the rest of her life. She wanted to tell him about the fake condition she gave him to keep him safe. She wanted to tell him how he came into her life. She wanted to tell him about the research she had done about the small people fictions she had found all those years ago when she first found him. And yet she didn't at the same time. In a flash, all of these thoughts, worries, and desires were gone, and she was once again Amanda Silverstein, sitting there with her son, Parker, drinking hot chocolate on his very first snow day.
Mama?
Parker's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She cleared her throat and looked down at her son. Yes, sweetie? She asked.
Would it be okay if I go outside and play in the snow? And then call Billy and Bailey?
Asked Parker. Parker's mom smiled as she considered her son's request. Of course, she smiled. Which do you want to do first?
Play! It's still snowing outside,
cheered Parker as he hurried into his room and pulled out as many layers as he could. He intended to make some fun things to show his friends, and the sooner the better. Amanda helped get Parker dressed and quickly dressed herself before checking outside and scooping up the minuscule child. The way Parker was dressed reminded her of the kid from A Christmas Story, when he couldn't put his arms down. Despite his appearance, however, Parker was still agile and flexible. The layers he picked kept him maneuverable and warm at the same time. He had never liked feeling too restrained or unable to move freely. It was weird. He was never claustrophobic, and if he was being honest, he enjoyed small and tight spaces. It was the thought of being restrained and unable to move or get away that made him uncomfortable. Just another odd sensation that crept up in him from time to time. The sudden rush of cold air from the outside world drew his attention to the present, and within minutes, Parker was outside in the snow making snow angels with his mama. There were several clear spaces by the house, but slightly in the neighbor's yard, which were free of footsteps and debris that Parker started his work. He started by making a daisy chain of snow angels, which his mom took pictures of. Next, he started making the biggest snowboy family he could muster. His mom helped him from time to time, but she mostly helped by snapping twigs and finding eyes and noses for Parker's creations. This, too, was picture-worthy. It wasn't until Parker walked up to the tree and started climbing the bark and jumping into the snow that he noticed something odd. Parker's mom had stepped away for a moment because a client called her and needed some information. So, in the meantime, Parker decided to try and climb around the tree by grasping onto the bark and shimmying from one side to the next. When Parker made it to the opposite side of the tree, he noticed something that made his hair stand on end. It was so odd that he actually dropped to the ground and rubbed his eyes with the backs of his hands. Footprints. At least, he thought they looked like footprints. They were right by the base of the tree and, upon further investigation, led into the roots. Parker was absolutely taken aback. Shaking all over, he stepped forward and pressed his shoes into the snow and saw that the prints were a little bigger than his, but about the same proportionally. But how? Did this belong to an animal? Or did this belong to someone like him? Was there someone else like him out here in the cold? His mind began to race and made him feel nauseous. He needed to know more. Carefully, he stepped forward under the tree roots and glanced around. Like a detective, he began combing over the snow-covered leaves and along the dirt. Something about the place felt secure to him, and that odd sensation of being watched crept over him again. Parker whipped around and nearly leapt out of his skin to see his mom leaning over by the roots, peering in at him. There was something completely unnerving about seeing a giant looming eye over him. Again, why? This was his mom. "Parker, what are you doing in there?" asked his mom. He began to sputter over his words as he clambered out of the roots.
Mama! I think there's someone else out here!"
Parker proclaimed. His mom's features stiffened as she glanced from Parker to the tree roots. "Someone else? That's not possible," she said. Not possible? How could she say something like that?
"It's true! Look! There are footprints! They look like mine!"
urged Parker as he ran over and pointed to the spots he saw before. At second look, they were filled partially with snow, meaning they had probably been there for a while. His mom's eyes narrowed as she knelt further and evaluated the area. Her heart was racing 1,000,000 miles a minute. Was there someone else, small like Parker, out here in the snow? Did they leave because they came outside to play? Or were they gone? What would happen if whoever left these footprints found Parker? Would they have the answers he was looking for? Or would something else have happened? To Amanda, the moment lasted a lifetime. She tried to compose herself as she gazed down into her son's eagerly awaiting eyes. What could she tell him? Was now the time to talk about the truth? She tried to look calm and confident, but the intuitive child may have seen her flash of fear moments earlier. To Parker, on the other hand, she seemed a bit quiet and tense, and not nearly half as excited as he felt. This was possibly his chance to meet someone his size, ask them questions about their condition, and if they knew anything else that he didn't know. Parker. Just the way she said his name made Parker feel defeated. I think these might have just belonged to a small critter, like a mouse or a rat, maybe even a squirrel. I just don't know who would be out in cold like this.
But, Mama...
Parker looked back at the footprints and, much like the episode of that science show his mom liked, Bones, there was that weird, reasonable doubt in his mind. Maybe it did belong to something else. Also, his condition was an extremely rare one. What were the chances of someone like him being out in a place like this in a snowstorm? It was probably just a feeling. Parker sighed and nodded.
Maybe.
Good. Now, I think we've had enough fun in the snow. Let's get inside and get warm. And maybe, just maybe, you and I can read some of that Aragon book together? Would you like that? Asked Amanda.
Yes, Mama,
said Parker, feeling a bit defeated. He climbed back onto his mom's hand and stared at the scene in front of him. The little snow boys, the little snow angels. Everything was so little. Parker sighed and pulled his legs into his chest as his mom carried the both of them back into the house. The entire trip back, he couldn't help but think that his mom might have been keeping something from him. There was something in her eyes that just made her waver. What was it? And why? Parker shrugged it off. Perhaps one day he would ask her about it. Until then, he let himself feel excited that he and his mama were going to spend some time reading on this beautiful, snowy day. Too bad he didn't look up into the branches high above.